Welcome back, everyone. Remember, this program comes to you thanks to the generosity of friends and members of Disciples of the Word Ministries located at 63 Arlington Street in Nashua, New Hampshire. And remember that Disciples of the Word Ministry is a Sabbath-keeping group of believers. We meet on Saturdays, not Sundays. Saturdays, not Fridays either. Saturdays. So at 10:30 a.m. at 63 Arlington Street in Nashua. So we are studying the book of Esther. And today we were having some difficulties with technology to get in. For some reason, I was not able to get in. It looks like the AI took over, but we are in. And I'm sorry for the delay for those that were waiting. I was also waiting to trying to get in. Anyway, but welcome back. We already prayed. So let's dive in directly into the book of Esther, chapter 6. And let me see, where is my I don't see my, there you go. Now I found it. Couldn't see my screen to share. There you go. Okay. There you have it. Book of Esther, chapter 6. We'll make this bigger so it would be easier to read. So on that night, just to give you a recap of what we said last week. Last week we were talking that Esther prepared this banquet, but there was an ethical problem. She would go and tell the king, you need to be sympathetic towards the Jews. You cannot commit this genocide, because she herself then would be presented as someone, she would be presenting herself as someone that was siding with a group of people that a royal decree had been issued against them. And that would put her in jeopardy, and it would not do anything good for the Jews. And since she was in this conundrum, in this predicament, what she does is that she invited the king to a banquet and Haman. But in the first banquet, instead of telling the king what her request and petition was, what she does is that she planted the seeds of doubts in the king's mind that something romantic was going on between Haman and the queen. And the king obviously cannot sleep that night, and at that night they were trying to calm him down by reading him the chronicles of the empire, or the things that happened years ago. And it happened to be that the book they picked up to read included the story of this guy called Mordecai, who happened to be Esther's uncle and also adoptive father. And the chronicle said that he saved the life of the king and gave the details, but nothing was done to reward this guy, Mordecai, for what he did on behalf of the king. Then the king had this idea and asked, has this guy been rewarded? No, nothing has been done for him. And at the same time, here comes Haman, not following Zeresh, his wife's advice to wait until the morning. He comes in the middle of the night to request the head of the same guy, Mordecai, that the king wants to honor. Then the king asked him, knowing that there is something on in Haman's mind, possibly with his wife, what should be done to the man whom the king wants to honor. Haman misreads those words, thinking, because he was so full of himself, thinking that the king wanted to honor him. And we heard the language that Haman uses. Everything is about the king, right? And um, and that's exactly what he does, thinking that the king is going to do this. And it at the same time, on that night, also before Haman comes to the king to request Mordecai's head, what happened is that the Mordecai, or better said, Haman, goes to his family to tell them about all his greatness, and to his children, to his friends and neighbors. And but there is something that he cannot have, and what he cannot have is the head of Mordecai. And we were making parallels between Haman and Adam, where both wanted something they could not have. And every time you go in that direction of something, of having to want something that is forbidden, it will cause, or it will end up in death. And let's see how this plays out. This is the second day of the banquet in Esther chapter 6. And let's see um, what the what Haman asked the king, um, when the king asked him what should be done to the man whom the king wants to honor. And then we will go into the second night of the banquet. Let me share the screen here just briefly. Okay. So we are just recapping. So Haman came in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman said in his heart, whom would the king delight to honor besides myself? So he's so full of himself, right? It's very common these days to find people in power that they are so full of themselves. Is just
It
it's
goes
just
with this
it's just
territory.
I know. And, and Haman said unto the king, for the man whom the king delighteth to honor. So notice the language right here. For the man whom the king delighteth to honor. This is something we emphasized last week. We're just recapping. Let royal apparel be brought, which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and whose head a crown royal is set. So you hear this language: king, royal, king, king, royal, crown, right? And let the apparel and the horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man therewith whom the king delighteth to honor, and cause him to ride on horseback through the streets of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. So let's find out how many times um, this word um, Hamelech, which is right here, the kin, right? How many times this word is used? Right here. One, Hamelech here. And right here, two, Hamelech. Three, Hamelech. Then right here, Hamelech. Then right here, so we have so far how many?
Four.
So far four, five, Hamelech. And then right here, six, Amelech again. So six times this guy is basically bringing up the concept of the king, plus the 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 apparel, right? Right here, the apparel, royal apparel, plus the horse of the king, the royal crown, right? And and um, and to be done this proclamation in front of everybody, so that everybody would know what needs to happen to the one the king delights to honor. He has to do that early in the morning, right? The king said to Haman, make haste and take the apparel and the horse as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew. Specifically, he says that sitteth at the king's gate, let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. And that's exactly what he did. Then took Haman the horse, apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and caused him to ride through the streets of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor. And Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house, mourning. Look at the language, mourning, and having his head covered. So the guy is crying, his head is covered, he's in shame. And then he goes, and Haman recounted unto Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends, everything that had befallen him. So this is a second meeting where he is basically debriefing them about what happened throughout the day. Then said his wise men and Zeresh, his wife, unto him, If Mordecai, before whom thou hast begun to fall, be of the seed of the Jews, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And twice, right here, they are saying a very interesting concept. Before whom thou hast begun to fall. So has begun, and here shalt surely fall before him. So this has begun is like a play on words, even in the Hebrew. We won't get into that because it's not necessarily necessary, but it's a play on words. It's like a contrast, or he began, or it shall surely fall. So it's like an oxymoron. Basically, if it has began, most likely it shall surely fall. And while they were yet talking with him, right, came the king's chamberlains and hastened to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. And his his face just changed, Haman's face, to the point that Haman now is happy to see that he again has the favor of the king. Any questions so far? No questions?
No.
Okay. We're going to go to chapter 7. So let me share chapter 7 here. And we're going to do it. We're going to do it this way. Okay. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther, On the second day, at the banquet of wine, whatever thy petition, Queen Esther, shall be granted thee, and whatever thy request, even to the half of the kingdom, shall be performed. This is the third time the king is repeating the same words. He did it at the court, and Esther said, Please come to a banquet. He did it the day before in the first banquet, and she said, Can you please come back to a second banquet? And this is the second banquet. This is the third time this has happened in 5 days. The king has promised the queen to give him, or to give her, excuse me, half of the kingdom. Because remember, she asked for the king to come. Now, then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition and my people at my request. She's not going to, right here, she's not asking first for the lives of the Jews. She's asking first for my life. So she's presenting this in a personal matter, not as a political matter, even though it's a political matter. She's presenting it as a personal. She knows that the king loves her. She knows that the king suspects that Haman has something to do with her. And the king wants to know. And now is the time when she already planted the seeds suspicions in the king's mind that Haman is plotting something against him with his bride. So, or with the king's bride. And then she says these words. Then, after she requests, she makes it personal. Then, this personal request extends to the family and my people at my request. And then she uses this language, for we are sold, and I and my people to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. So this is language that was taken directly from the decree. The decree said that all the Jews on the 13th day of the month of Adar needed to be destroyed, slain, and annihilated or perished. And she uses this language, but this language right here, we are sold, is language taken directly from the story of Joseph. Joseph is the one who was sold by the Midianites, but the brothers were the ones who created the conditions for Joseph to be sold as a slave. And she's using this language um, right here again. But if we had been sold for bondmen, which means to be slaves, and bondwomen, I had held my peace. So this is language taken directly, even in the Hebrew, right here. We won't get into that, but it's fascinating. It's deeper in the Hebrew language. Um, is is quoting directly from the story of Joseph and the sale of Joseph directly. Then she says, um, for the adversary, right? The adversary for the adversary is not worthy that the king be in damage. All right. So then, verse 5, spoke the king Ahasuerus and said unto Esther, the queen, who is he and where is he that dares presuming his heart to do so? I want to know who wants to do damage to my bride, to my wife. Who is the one who dares to do this? Remember, she's framing this not as a political request. This is a personal request of a wife to a powerful man that even the wife is subjected to. And Esther said, an adversary, right? An adversary and an enemy, even this wicked Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. So his semblance changed. He's terrified, petrified. He doesn't know what to do. He's embarrassed. He was embarrassed just hours before by going throughout the city and proclaiming, Mordecai, this is what the king wants to do to a person whom the king wants to honor, or whom the king delights and he wants to honor. So hours before, on the very same day, a Haman had an outward embarrassment. Now, the outward embarrassment moves to the inward embarrassment. The first one is public, the second embarrassment is private, but it's still embarrassment. And it looks like before someone falls, someone in political power, first he needs to be embarrassed publicly, and then he's embarrassed privately. And it seems to be like that pattern. And if you look at most falls of political figures, first there is a political scandal, and then there is a private scandal. And both of them are like in that order, happen in that order before people have to be taken down. It happened with Nixon. It happened with Ford. It happened with every every political figure that did something inappropriate. First had to come the public embarrassment and then the private embarrassment that follows through. Now, and the king arose in his wrath. Of course, he's upset from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. See, he's at the garden, and I won't get into what the midrashic commentaries talk. That the midrashic commentaries is fascinating. He says a lot of things. I won't give you details, but one of the things that says that on that day the the angels um, were something like that's like replacing the trees. Like the servants were replacing the trees, but some angels were part of the servants. And the replacement of the trees happened because Haman requested the replacement of the trees in the king's garden palace. And the king thought that that was too much for Haman. Of course, that's a metaphoric language. And the rabbis, the old sages, always use this language to speak about something deeper. We won't get into that. It's deeper of what we are trying to do here. But it's fascinating to read all the stuff. And what happened is Haman remained to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. He knew the king really well, but the king was trying to take a moment to think this whole thing through because the night before, he couldn't sleep thinking that Haman was romantically involved with his wife. And now he's realizing that this is not the case. What's happening is that Haman has been plotting to get rid of his wife and then get rid of him as king. That's why I imagine, the king thinking that's why he's using this language when I ask him, what shall be done to the men whom the king wants to honor? He's using all this language: the king, the royal crown, the royal horse, the royal robe, the scepter, all that kind of thing. Now, verse 8: Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the couch whereon Esther was. That's a no. No matter if you are a member of the nobility, you never come into the same place where the king or the queen were sitting, period. That means intimacy. And it means breaking not only protocols, but also breaking social ethics standards. It means that you have crossed the line. He has fallen uh, into her couch, right? To plead for his life without even realizing that that action was basically crossing the line, breaking all protocols because he's so desperate. Because remember, people who are so full of themselves, they think that their value comes from their achievements, from their accomplishments. Their value, they think that their value comes from the things they attain. And when they lose the favor or the person who is the one, the catalyzer to give them whatever it is that they have achieved, in this case the king has given everything that Haman had, then they lose sight of reality and they become just narrow-minded. And when that happens, I mean, this is a psychological issue. When that happened, Haman loses sight of where he is. In reality, he loses sight of all the rules, and then he falls into her couch, pleading for his life, probably holding her legs, pleading, please save my life. I didn't mean to. I didn't know that you were a Jew, and yada, yada, yada. And perhaps Haman is also thinking, in this whole thing, why did I get involved with this Jew? My issue was with him. Why did I get involved against everybody? Right? So then said the king, will he even force the queen before me in the house? And the interesting thing right here is that what the king says, um, right here, as the word went out of the king's mouth, right? As the word went out of the king's mouth. What what in reality the language is using here um, is like that the king spoke without thinking. That like the king slipped, the tongue slipped. Why? Because when the subconscious has been thinking and creating an idea and creating a concept, it doesn't matter rationality. There's nothing rational about this. The king just slipped. Why? Because the subconscious had been already working, thinking, everything, processing everything that has been happening. So the subconscious basically betrayed him, and the king without thinking just um just said those words, and at that moment the servants covered Haman's face. In some of these servants, the midrashic literature says they were angels, so they came and covered his face. And remember that right here in the first embarrassment, um in the first embarrassment, take a look at what happened right here in the first embarrassment. He said what the text tells us is right here. And Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house, mourning and what? Having his head covered, right? Because having your head covered, it means shame, right? Remember that we told you that his his um his embarrassment was first public. Now the same thing that happens with the embarrassment in public now is going to happen in private, right? Vatefu rush. So Abel Vatefu rush. So this concept of having his head covered. So this idea is also here where they cover his face. Yeah. Ufne, Haman, Hafu. So the same concept that covering his face, right? Covering his face. It happened in public, now it's happening in private. There was embarrassment in public, now there is embarrassment privately. So then said Harbona, right? One of the chamberlains who went to the house of Haman the hours before to invite him to come to the banquet, right? To remind him of the banquet that were before the king. Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman hath made for Mordecai, who spoke good for the king. So Harbona knows the story. Most likely Harbona was the one who pulled that book out, that book of Chronicle, for the king to read when he was not able to sleep, right? So it standeth in the house of Haman. And the king said, hang him thereon. So what we are seeing is when Adam tried to take the forbidden tree, it cost him his life. Death was to follow. First, there was this sense of shame, right? This sense of fear. Remember what he says right here? Um, right here, that Haman was terrified. So there was fear. So this is what I'm saying. When Adam in the Garden of Eden went and touched the forbidden fruit, the very first thing that happened is that they were afraid. Then the next thing that happens is that they feel shame. So that's exactly what's going on. The next thing that happens is that his face is covered. Why? Because this is a symbol of being ashamed. This is a symbol of doom has fallen upon you, therefore you have become a shameful person. And the very first, the same parallels are in both stories. And that's why, remember that I told you how this is not new. I'm not telling you anything new. The old sages already figured this out, saying that because of this tree, right? This tree, this galot, where Haman, this Ha'etz, yeah, Hine Ha'etz, uh, uh, behold the tree. So by using the tree, so it could have said simply Hine Etz without the. This is a the, right? So right here is translated as gallows because somebody's going to be hung up. But if if this the would have not been in here, most likely the old sages would have not made the connection between Haman and Adam. Because of this, that tree, they believe it was a reference to the forbidden tree in the Garden of Eden. That now here in the story of Esther is repeating itself, but it's not a tree, it's a person. This forbidden tree was Mordecai, and Haman represented Adam. Is it making sense to you? Is it making sense? Or is it difficult to follow?
That makes sense to me.
Okay. Verse 10. So they hang Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath assuaged, right? And how did Haman end up? He ended up dead. What happened with Adam? He ended up dead eventually, cast out from God's presence, right? Obviously, once he said hang him thereon, he has to be taken out of the presence of the king, out of the palace, and being brought to whatever he created for himself, but out of the palace. The same happened with Adam. He had to be taken out of God's palace, which was his garden, the Garden of Eden, and then being exiled to die eventually in the land of the exile. In the case of Adam, it lasted 930 years, this exilement, or this exile, verse said. In the case of Haman, it lasted just a few minutes, right? So just moving from the palace to the gallows was a matter of minutes. And within the hour, he was dead. And not only him, look at what happened later on because he still has kids. So this is considered treason because remember, the king said, will he even force the queen before me in the house? This is the king that he slipped because his subconscious had been thinking, right? He's thinking he is after my wife. So he slipped. He didn't mean to say that. But at the moment he spoke that, it was like a sentence was given against the king, against Haman by the king. All right. So we've already passed the time. And next week, we're going to go into some of the best parts of this book. Is in chapter 8. I would strongly recommend that you read chapter 8. It's fascinating. And remember, we're doing this study because of this rise of anti-Semitism everywhere. And if you want to know how to deal with people who are anti-Semitic and how to portray yourself in the midst of it, the book of Esther is the best example for that. Is one of the best in the Bible to give us insight how we should conduct ourselves with all this anti-Semitism, especially if you're working within the political realm, if you are a public officer, because this book was written for people specifically that do this kind of job in government. So understanding this is interesting, and it will give you a lot of insight into the psychological aspects of the actors and the players, why people do the things they do. What is it that motivates them? I always like to make this psychological analysis because it gives you a complete different perspective about things. It gives you a more human perspective, and we don't see the Bible as something that is far away, ethereal, esoteric, or spiritual only, but also something that is very human, right? And that's the idea that we want to do. So next week we are going to study chapter 8 of the book of Esther. Don't miss it. It's fascinating. And if you have any question, please let me know. Questions, comments, ideas, suggestions.
So the king wasn't upset that Esther was a Jew and she lied to him.
No, no longer there was an issue. Why? Because she's not making a political request. She's making a personal request. I'm your wife. I'm here to represent Mother Persia. But this guy is in the way by create he finesse you by creating this 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 decree without telling you they were the Jews. I am a Jew. I didn't have a chance to tell you because we never talk about it. But we have been so busy, dealing with with the entertainment of all these people, their party and bringing unity, listening to all the governors from the different provinces, entertaining the new people, the wedding, all of that. I didn't have a chance. You never asked me. So Esther could have downplayed all of that, which was um, a very easy way to deal with the real threat that was in front of them. That was a genocide within the kingdom that would even affect the wife of the king, and that was a no-no. So Haman really beat his foot. And sometimes people who are in power, who are so full of themselves, they do things without knowing who the real players are, and without knowing the power that the real players have, and without knowing that the people who really have power, sometimes they are just not showing that to others. They are simply there, and making sure that things are running smoothly behind the scenes. And that's what they do. They are very good at doing that. But those who are full of themselves, they need everybody to see them. Oh, look at me! I've done this. I've done that. But the
They always
the
think they're smarter than everyone.
I know, and because of that, they always fail, and it's really sad. All right. So remember, this Saturday, 63 Arlington Street in Nashua, New Hampshire, we will continue our series on the kingdom. We have been talking about kingdom. This book of Esther is all about the Jews in the kingdom, in the Middle Persian, their transition or their time of interaction with the Middle Persian kingdom as part of the exile that they had to go through by God's order because of their sin. But they did the best they could to really survive. And, as I was reading, I read something earlier this morning, like at 3 o'clock in the morning. I read an article by someone saying, I am I am ashamed of being an Arab because we have done all of our efforts trying to wipe out a group of people from existence simply because they're different than us. And he goes on and on and on, and it's fascinating to read that article, um, because in reality, basically, he said we talking about the Arabs and the Palestinians. He said we have used all of our efforts, all of our energy, trying to get rid of someone that we consider enemy, while what they are doing is improving themselves, making things better for themselves. And if we just change our mindset and our focus, we would do better. We would do as good as them. And I think he had a very valid point. I think that that obsession that people have against the Jewish people is just unfounded. It's irrational, and is very similar to the one that Haman was having. And remember, every time we try to eat the forbidden fruit, we will get in trouble. So don't make the same
Mhm.
mistake. Who would like to pray?
I can pray.
Yes, please.
Lord, we thank you, Lord, for the Bible's lesson tonight with Pastor Luna. May you enlighten our minds. May you help us understand your word. And may you help us be good Christians, with everybody around us. Help our families and our children. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
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 Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of the week. Stay warm.
Thank you.